And I say it's misleading because none of this ever happened. First off, the dam was never built. And the way the dam was never built was not because everybody sat down and wrote a letter and said it. No. The people in this region have the clarity that they understand that if you don't want these projects to go down, you cannot allow the machinery to enter your territory. Because if we're going to talk about being autonomous and free, we need to exercise control over our territories. And exercising control is what can come in and what can come out. So for 13 years, these people have been blockading all of the roads in and out of their territory. And they don't allow the machinery to enter. That's why for 13 years, this dam has never been built. So keep in mind, these are big families, anywhere from 10 to 20 people. But basically, it goes like the first week of the month, our families have to be blockaded. Second week of the month, y'all's families. Third week of the month, y'all's families, and so on and so forth. It's not literally you are stuck to the road for 7 days straight. No, you got like 10 or 12 people in your family. Y'all can take turns. But everybody has a vested interest in this because everybody has a vested interest in that we can keep our land, we can continue to grow our food, and they don't make the stupid dam and displace things. Okay, that's all the negative stuff. Now we're going to get to positive stuff, I promise. So, we'll zoom over here, and we're going to go, listen to me, there. We're going to go into the birthing scene, way over here. So here we are in the Bat Cave, not Bruce Wayne's Bat Cave. Our birthing scene, Bat Cave. So here, let me zoom in a few more. So here we have the midwife bat, who is helping the mother who's giving birth. We have the doulas, or I would say in Spanish, the comadres, that are helping out. So bats don't have hands, they can't give a hand, but they give a nail. So they're giving their nails as support. And they're surrounded on this road by all the medicinal plants that are used in the region for the health of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So this has a lot to do with in terms of our autonomy, especially in terms of women's bodies that have been probably some of the most regulated territories in the history of humanity, but not by them, by others. So it really has to do with like control of bodies and exercising that control in terms of health, in terms of reproduction, in terms of all the ways that that can look for a person. And then we go into the party scene that I love. It's my favorite scene, but not because I'm a party animal. I'm actually a very boring homebody. But I love the party scene because it reminds me of my youth. Because the fire is the center of this party scene. The fire is what brings everybody together. It is the belly button of the community. And then surrounded by that fire, we have the three elders and youths. And this has a lot to do with the relationships between elders and youth that have been lost in a lot of communities and the disintegration of generation interactions. So if we look really close at the elders, the armadillo, the sloth, and the tapir, they're telling stories of imprisonment, journey, the birds, and liberation. And those stories are being heard by the youth that are the quadamundi, it's like a raccoon, the turtle, and the crocodile. They're surrounded by different musicians, like this octopus playing the drums that represents water, the element of water. The heron playing the double flute that represents the wind. And you know, since we talk so much about death, we also have to talk about life because, you know, it's balanced, it's equal. So we go over here, there's this animal that in Colombia we call oruga, in Mexico they call pepescuitle, but what's important is that it's pregnant and it's dancing, and it's having a good time at the party. And then on the other side of the scene, as I explain to little kids when we do this graphic presentation, these are two snails making baby snails. And if you know that all mollusks have both male and female parts, you know that those snails are really having a fun time. So here we get to the last scene that we're going to look at as part of today's presentation. This is the assembly scene. So as I mentioned, there's all these different scenes. I didn't mention the market scene, the anti-militarization scene, the solidarity economic scene, the anti-water privatization scene. There's all these different scenes that are of a lot of importance. But if these different strategies of land defense and of defending ourselves do not go through a decision-making process that is of equal access and very participatory for everyone, they're probably not going to work. Because we see elections or voting as the dictatorship of the majority. So if we're a community and a little bit over half of us vote on something and then like 40% of us don't agree with that, we just kind of got left out. So we emphasize on what's called consensus. Consensus is this idea of taking decisions, but not like voting, even though voting can be part of consensus, but that's a side conversation. But what happens in consensus, basically folks will listen to each other, the right to listen and to be heard, until they can all come to an agreement. So the decision that comes out of a consensus, let's say we're doing consensus, that decision is not going to be 100% what I want. And it's not going to be 100% what you wanted or anybody else in this room. But it's going to be enough of what I wanted and enough of what all of you wanted that we feel sufficiently represented in that final decision to me stick on board. As opposed to just vote, and my thing didn't get in, so 100% of what I wanted didn't get included. As opposed to a little bit of what everybody. So it's really about like negotiating and meeting people halfway and having those levels of organizing. So on top of this methodology, we also have to talk about participation. Because if we're a community with all these sorts of different people, we can't be like, hey, we want you to come. Oh, no, those people over there, we're not going to decide with them. It doesn't work that way. Everybody has to participate. So if you look closely, we have mammals, we have birds, we have reptiles, we have amphibians, we have mollusks, we have insects, and we have plants. Because everybody has to be able to participate, no matter what differences that we may have for being diverse humans. And if we really get into the details, because I want to emphasize that everybody can participate, there's an ancestor, there is a breastfeeding mother, there are animals that may have brought their children or their siblings, their nieces or nephews. There is a differently abled gecko. And to emphasize, everybody has to be able to participate in these spaces, because if not, we're just reproducing what supposedly we're against to begin with. And you know, when we look at this space, the voluta, there's this crazy spiral in the middle. So I'm going to look at this spiral over here to explain what that represents. You see this one right here? This little spiral right here? So this is a Mayan hieroglyphic. It's called voluta with a V. When the spiral is upward, like you see there, it means someone is speaking. When the spiral goes downward, it means someone's listening. And when two spirals find each other and they kind of create this little funny thing, that means there's a conversation. They're simultaneously listening and speaking. So in our artistic freedom, as we call it, we interpreted what a voluta would look like if a people of peoples came together and put their minds together and created a common decision and then put that decision in motion. They started to walk their talk. So that's why we have this very crazy, not very tangible spiral in the middle of all these animals and plants who are speaking. And this is also like the final note to remind us, as we see the animals who are doing it here, this is our responsibility. Like nobody's going to come and liberate us, nobody's going to come and lead us or show us how to do it. We have to do it with all the blunders and mistakes and like digging our toes and messing up, and that's part of the process. And if somebody does come to you and say they're going to liberate you, be really like cautious of that. I would not believe that person. That we have to do that ourselves. Like that's really our responsibility, collectively as well as individually. And here we have this example that's being shown. So how are we on time? I've talked so much and I forget.
45.
Okay, we're still good. We started what?
Okay, because we started late-ish.
What time did we start?
I don't know.
Like 2:20-ish?
I think it was like 20, 30 minutes.
Okay. So if we're not done at like 5 on the dot, it's okay? Are you guys okay with that? You're gonna like get upset and walk out? Okay. Cool. Well, then that being said, here we're gonna stop with the graphic. We're gonna see our third video. Actually, no, we're gonna see a couple slides, then we'll see the third video, a couple more slides, and then the final video. That sounds good to folks. The next slides are all the original photographs and some of the work that we've been doing. Let me just close these. So this one. And I'm going to be really rude and I'm going to sit down. I apologize. So. This one. So when we started our work in Colombia as a Beehive collective, we really just started getting requests to present these banners. And we go to communities and we present the banners to kids, to adults, to different folks, kind of like the way we just did here. And then little by little, those requests started changing. Oh, we love the banners, but can you help us with a theater piece? Can you help us paint a mural? How about do some mapping exercises? And little by little, we evolved to what we are today, and we're a network of cultural workers. And what we do is we work with these communities that are living all the experiences that we just saw in the other videos and these graphics, and we work with the folks that are leading these processes of land defense to be able to learn the skills necessary to tell their own stories. I lived it in my own community. Someone very well-intended came from Italy because the company that's making the dam in my community is from Italy. They shot the video, they made it, they showed it all over the world. It raised so much awareness about the dam. So many people said they were in solidarity with us. And in our village, everything is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. So because of that, we give a lot of importance that we, or the people who have participated in our processes of land defense in very selfless ways, need to be the ones to acquire these skills, to have our personal transformations, and to be able to tell our own stories. And as I mentioned earlier, those stories, you can tell them with a paintbrush, you can tell them with your body, you can tell them with a camera. It's up to that person and how they want to communicate those stories. I'm going to skip through some stuff. Remember I mentioned the South American version of how they want to destroy everything and extract? Well, it's IRSA. And they want to divide the entire continent into hubs. And the ones that we're going to look at the most are 1, Andean hub, and 9, Amazonian hub. Because all the communities that we're going to look at, and all the ones that we just looked at, the YU communities, are living the projects associated with this. Like on the regional level, they're dealing with the mine, they're dealing with the canal, they're dealing with the pipeline. But on a continental level, they're the little intricate working pieces of a much larger macro project that encompasses an entire continent. We already saw this one, so the videos that we just saw are in this region. And I'm going to kind of swoop through those slides because we have already seen them. And then we're going to go to Putumayo, which is the Amazon. And then we're going to go to Huila, which is the Andean Mountains. It's a river valley area, and that's where I live and it's where my family's from. This is the YU map that I mentioned earlier. This is, again, these are about the communities we just saw in the videos. This is the YU territory, and just to say, I'm not going to get into all the details because it's a lot of information, but between gas, oil, coal, dams, train lines, pipelines, and national parks, they've had everything put on their territory and divided and taken away from them. And it is worth mentioning that this also includes ecological conservation. With today's green capitalism and the land grabs that are happening, and you can see in Paris how the ones responsible for the climate crisis are trying to put on green suits and appear that they're going to make everything better now when they're the ones who created the problem that we're living in. And part of that is actually conservation. So this place right here is called Portete Bay. And in 2004, there was a massacre there. 13 YU women and children were killed, and 300 YU people were forcibly displaced to Venezuela. When this massacre occurred, and actually this massacre is what eventually led to the Beehive Collective being invited to go to Colombia and accompany the survivors of this massacre. So when this massacre occurred, here you have the coal mine, the train, and the port to export the coal. So we saw that, and we were like, oh, it was the coal company who killed it. It has to be. I mean, look at the interest there. They want to expand the port. And we were just sure it had to be them. Well, just last year, the national government of Colombia created that into a national park, one of the newest ones in the country. Remember when I talked about prior and informed consultation? To do a project on your land, they have to consult with your community. So what happens today is, since these rights exist, acts of violence are used to displace people. Because if I come into a village, let's say this is a village, and I kill 5 of you, I scare the hell out of the rest of you, and all of you leave. And then the company arrives the next day, oh, I'm going to do a consultation. Oh, but there's nobody here. I guess I don't have to consult anybody. I can do whatever I want. As simple as that. So these are the strategies that these companies are using now. Not now, they've been using for a very long time. This is the second video we saw about the strength of YU women. Mikey Rodasari is from the first video we saw, the YU folks in Venezuela. Also to know, they make their own videos. They have all sorts of solar energy and wildlife rehabilitation programs, their own autonomous schools. They adhere to the 6th Declaration of the Lacandon Jungle. I recommend everybody read that. It's from the Zapatistas, that autonomous indigenous movement in southern Mexico. It's very important information on like how organizing works. Like, you really want to create a movement, like the Zapatistas, I think, are pretty effective in terms that they have had to deal with a lot of violence and a lot of repression from the Mexican and the US government for over 20 years. And nonetheless, their fight and their struggle not is to have a revolution and overthrow in Mexico or secede in Chiapas from Mexico, but is basically control our community, our territory. Very similar to lines that past movements like the Black Panthers or the American movement, the American Indian movement, or I War Kwan had at different points in US history. Amazon. It's really pretty, and are you all offended by cursing? It's really fucked up. So, tons of water, tons of biodiversity, the territory of about 14 different First Nations communities, and everywhere that is not green is open for oil extraction. The rivers flow from left to right. So if this is protected and you have a spill here, and the river goes like this, what difference does it make? Y'all understand what I'm saying in terms of hydrology, like the spill going down river? And there's many people who are impacted by this. So we're going to focus into this area right here, because they want to channelize this river to continue doing this, sending big oil tankers out on larger and larger dredges. So literally like bleeding out the Amazon through this channelized river. Here you can see the oil extraction, you can see the different pipelines. For those of you who don't know, Colombia has had an over 60-year-old armed conflict. The United States has been militarily involved since before it started. Since 2001, publicly, since the early 1990s, secretly, the US has been backing the aerial fumigations of a wide-spectrum herbicide called glyphosate, known as Roundup weed killer, made by Monsanto here in the United States. Here in the US, it's illegal to fumigate this from a plane. In Colombia, it's fumigated from 2 kilometers up. It doesn't only hit coca crops, or the crops that are used for drug production, but also food, forest, rivers. And when you go into these communities, it's very normal to see children covered with rashes head to toe from being exposed to these fumigations. So this is the context of this area and what the communities are having to deal with. Oil extraction has been happening here since the 60s. There are indigenous nations that went extinct because there was no social media in the 60s. There was nobody going in there to see what was going on, and that the people literally were wiped out by a single company. So this is the context of what happens on the ground in this territory. Keep in mind this channelizing of the river and this mega highway that's going to go from Venezuela all the way to Buenos Aires, Argentina, through the Amazon, because these have to do with extraction, taking out goods. And we're going to get to do communities that are directly impacted by these policies that we're working with. I'm going to skip that map. So the Siona people are a First Nations community in both Colombia and in Ecuador. These folks lived on the Putumayo River, the one that I mentioned being channelized, through the exact scenario I just mentioned earlier. You kill a couple leaders, you terrorize everybody, you get them out, is how they were forcibly removed. Because if they're living on the riverbank, nobody can channelize that river without their permission. So they got them out. So now they have to live in a regional city. These are people who lived in the bush, didn't have to use clothes, didn't have to use money, didn't have to use Spanish. And now they have to use clothes, they have to use money, they have to use Spanish. They're surrounded with drugs, with alcohol, with violence, with a completely different context than what they're used to. This is one of the few communities where we don't have our own project of what we do. The mothers of the community have a lot of clarity of what they want, and we basically get there and take orders from the moms. And a lot of our work, as with the YU communities I forgot to mention earlier, is the use of these graphics and other methodologies to strengthen land-based knowledge. What is land-based knowledge? Indigenous languages, like any language in the world, is tied to your environment. And when your environment has always been a forest that is uncontaminated, you have full access of your vocabulary because your vocabulary is all around you. But then when animals start going extinct and plants start going extinct, that knowledge, the vocabulary of those things and the knowledge starts to go in disuse because it's not there to be talked about. And that knowledge starts to be lost as well. The medicinal plants, the methodologies for preparing them, all of that. So since so many of these graphics have the animals that many places you can't see anymore, it is a way of using them to talk about these ideas and this knowledge within their context, as well as remembering the languages, the names of these animals in their own language. So that's a big part of how these graphics are used on the ground. So this is the Cofan people. They're the ones being impacted by the highway. To situate you, this is Ecuador and this is Colombia. Like, we're really right on the border. So on this river, all the time we're seeing every person with a gun you can imagine. from both Colombia and from Ecuador. Nobody respects the territory of these people. And in addition to us doing this Beehive work and the videography work that we've done with the different communities so that they can produce their own videos, they have a particular predicament. So there's schools on the Ecuadorian side, even though the folks are on both sides of the community. And Ecuador has this law that at first seems great, which is all children have the right to education. And if you as a parent don't send your kids to school, you'll get in trouble. At first that seems great. But it turns out that in indigenous schools, they're not supplying bilingual teachers. So it's accelerating language loss because they're getting teachers that will not speak to the kids in their own language. So the parents don't want their kids going to school, but they can get in serious trouble if they don't send their kids to school. Not to mention it's an hour on the canoe that the kids have to go by themselves. So we're working with them, and one of the Beehive members in Colombia is actually an elder indigenous university professor. And in this collaboration, we're helping to develop a homeschool decolonized curriculum. Because the parents don't want to send their kids to school anymore, they want to homeschool. But they also recognize, like, we can teach them everything they need to know about our community. But they also recognize things like free trade agreements. We don't know nothing about that, but we know we need to know about that in order to defend ourselves. So we're participating with them, especially in those more global issues, on helping them create the curriculum that they need for their youth. This is about the Rios Vivos movement, the anti-dam movement, but before we get into this, I'm going to show the video. How are we doing? Y'all bored?
Nope.
Okay. And this video is about the anti-dam movement in Huila, where I'm from, so you're going to see my people's all up in this one.
El río es una fuente de trabajo para muchas familias.
Mi papá me contaba que antes no había carne y decían pongan la valla que me va a traer el pescado para el almuerzo. Dijo mi papá, íbamos y hacíamos 2, 3 tiros con la atalaya y ya cogíamos lo del pescado y no se venía. Dijo mi papá, y había tanto pescado, todo aquí, esta parte era nuestra playa. El río, mejor dicho, el río por lo general era nuestro, de toda esta población, donde todos podíamos andar, ingresar muy tranquilamente, y a la hora que quisiera y como quisiera, ir a hacer paseos de olla, ir a pescar, así, fuera por simplemente irse a bañar, a la hora de que usted quisiera irse a bañar. Imagínense la belleza de mi pueblo con 2 ríos y a 5 minutos cada río.
Una vida digna es lo que teníamos.
¿sí? Teníamos la pesca, teníamos el trabajo, teníamos todo, todo. No teníamos plata, pero nos sentíamos bien, tranquilos, nadie nos molestaba. Y teníamos todo, usted trabajaba, había trabajo, cualquiera lo buscaba, daba el empleo. Y ahora está esto muy difícil. Ahorita hay empleo, pero por la multinacional, porque ella está empleando para hacer todo lo que tienen que hacer, pero dejen que se vaya. ¿Quién nos va a emplear? Y los empleadores que teníamos aquí se marcharon, vendieron su finca y se fueron.
Mi nombre es Carlos Alfredo Hernández, tengo 58 años, de 50 vivo en el río Magdalena, vivo de la pesca. Yo estoy subiendo todo el desplazamiento que a mí me desplazaron de allá y me vine para acá y aquí están haciendo lo mismo. Cuando la represa de Caña también me sacaron de herradura. Nosotros teníamos una islita allá y esa isla no la inundó la represa y nadie dijo, tomen cuando sea esto para que trabajen, para que siga trabajando, no, nadie. Nadie nos dio nada porque eso no tenía escritura porque era en medio del río. Por eso tenemos que seguir para acá para arriba.
Los de aquí, esta comunidad, prácticamente se vivía del jornal que se hacían en las fincas que la empresa adquirió supuestamente para reasentamiento. O sea, la empresa reasienta a unos para joder a otros. Y los que estábamos laborando en esas tierras quedamos pues desplazados, o sea, perdimos el derecho al trabajo. Ahora, el río Magdalena, dependemos de toda la pesca aquí en el río Magdalena y eso hace prácticamente eso se acabó. Si con Betania se veía como exterminado esto, ahorita con el tiempo, pues a veces es cierto que no cogemos nada. Y fuera de eso nos quitan Las Vegas, porque aquí hay gente que producía en Las Vegas, tenía sus tierritas en la cual producía la comida para aquí la comunidad y para sacar a Garzón a vender los productos. O sea que prácticamente nosotros quedamos sin alimentos, sin trabajo, sin nada. Hace unos años ya nos toca mendigar o robar o aguantar hambre.
Por eso estamos diciendo, señor defensor, ¿existe o no el derecho a la protesta?
Sí.
Entonces, lo que nosotros estamos haciendo es ejerciendo ese derecho. Nosotros no estamos bloqueando nada.
Exacto, si no hay bloqueo, no hay ningún problema.
Exacto, entonces, ¿por qué no van a desalojar?
¿Por qué los de ese que se bloqueó?
Y le estamos diciendo al Estado, no queremos salir del territorio. Tenemos derecho a vivir en el campo colombiano. Tenemos derecho a no querer vivir en la ciudad, a no querer sufrir la miseria de la ciudad. A los pobres que están allá, no, un poquito de arroz, un poquito de lentejas, decía el otro. O sea, comemos mejor nosotros. Eso es la dignidad para nosotros. La dignidad es lo que nosotros tenemos en el estómago. La dignidad es poder producir nuestros propios alimentos. Eso es lo que nosotros consideramos digno. Para mi pueblo y para mi tierra, dignidad es tener un plato de frijoles y una arepa al lado. Eso es dignidad para mí. Entonces, les hemos dicho, somos pacíficos, no es contra ellos, es contra el despojo que está implementando el Estado colombiano. Es contra la criminalización, contra el hecho de que nos estén diciendo que somos lo que no somos. Nosotros aquí no somos ni violentos, ni somos terroristas, somos gente de bien. Y esta es la prueba que necesitábamos también. Nosotros aquí no estamos haciendo nada, absolutamente nada, por lo que nos tengan que atropellar. Estamos aquí de manera pacífica, tranquila, dando un debate público que es un derecho constitucional. Nosotros no tenemos que pedirle permiso a nadie para reunirnos, para debatir. Eso es un ejercicio constitucional y cuando lo queramos hacer en la plaza pública, cuando lo queramos hacer enfrente de la casa, a debatir los problemas de este país. ¿Y cuál es el gran problema de este país? Tierra para producir comida, tierra para los campesinos, tierra para nosotros vivir dignamente, aguas para la vida y no para la muerte. Ese es el problema de este país, eso es lo que le estamos discutiendo.
Pues las opciones que tenemos es hacer una dispensa campesina, que por ejemplo, yo creo que un ser humano con 5 hectáreas mantenga más o menos bien. Entonces van a caer más familias, va a haber más trabajo, va a haber más comida, porque la gente va a trabajar más. Me gustaría que eso pasara como hemos venido siendo nosotros, ¿no? Mi familia, que ha sido pasando de padres a hijos, una cultura y la cual es muy bonita y yo soy feliz ser campesino y me gusta que me digan campesino porque eso es lo que soy y eso es lo que sé hacer.
Nosotros desde que empezamos este proceso, ese ha sido nuestro objetivo, o sea, que estas tierras sean para una reserva campesina agroalimentaria. Para nosotros, pues, como veníamos en ese cuento, porque las tierras pues, que van a ser inundadas en esta parte, pues son 100% productivas y de ahí se sacaba prácticamente los alimentos para esta zona. Y ese es el objetivo que siempre se ha como fijado junto con la resistencia, de crear una reserva campesina, porque pues realmente tenemos la seguridad alimentaria por ese lado y son tierras que son 100% fértiles y somos más en el caso de la agua somos 250 familias y en la cual pues todos somos campesinos y la meta de nosotros pues es producir comida, ¿no? Para el mismo sustento de nosotros. En ese objetivo estamos, hemos visitado ya varios compañeros de donde hay reservas campesinas y ¿para qué? O sea, eso en bien común funciona, pero entonces para eso tenemos que liberar el territorio y en eso estamos, ese es el objetivo que tenemos nosotros ahora.
Yeah, so lucky. You may have seen me in there, swimming across the river. Rio News Movement. We are the national anti-dam movement in Colombia. We started as a network in the 1990s, and in 2011 we consolidated ourselves as a movement. We are made up of Afro-Colombian, indigenous, peasant, farmer, and urban poor members. We are a movement of the people who are impacted by dams, regardless if that's direct or indirect impact. Some of the basics of our movement: we are an anti-capitalist movement. Capitalism is the root of the problem that we are living. It's killing off Mother Earth as we speak. We also don't follow traditional human rights framework. Traditional human rights framework, they can destroy my river, and I have technically not had any of my rights assaulted or violated in any which way. But within non-Western, not European descendant societies, you know, our territory is our body. And our first territory is our mind. And our second territory is our body, and our third territory is where we inhabit. And none of these are isolated or can be separated from any of the others. So my river has a hydrological cycle it needs to complete. It needs to be born from its source, it needs to flow to the ocean, it needs to be rain, there needs to be evaporation, it needs to complete its cycle. If my river is dammed, and it is cut off from the rest of the world's waters, my river is no longer liberated. And if my river cannot flow, and its banks have been flooded, and I cannot walk alongside my river every day and fish like we fished for hundreds of years, or pan for gold, or collect medicinal plants, then I am not free. And so until all of our rivers are free, we cannot talk about peoples being free, because my liberation is intrinsic to my territory's liberation. I'm not in a bubble floating around, not dependent on air, water, and earth. I'm dependent on all of that. So I'm going to talk about my liberation and my people's liberation. The earth's liberation has to be part of it. It has to configure within that framework. We know very clearly that dams are not green development. Some people would like to say that they're good for the environment because they don't have fossil fuels and this and that. Dams are huge sources of methane. They're huge sources of carbon dioxide. They displace massive amounts of people, not to mention agricultural and economic activities, as well as ecosystems. Dams are not green in any shape or form. We are very intense about staying in our territory. Give you context, after Syria, Colombia has the most amount of displaced peoples in the entire world. There's 48 million Colombians, over 5 million of us are displaced. We are very clear that we do not want to be refugees or immigrants or migrants or displaced people anywhere. Most people in my community, in all of the communities of our movement, are pretty staunch and they will die on their lands and they will not be removed. And when we say remain on our land with dignity, what is dignity? Because dignity is not very tangible, even though the compañera on the video was saying it. What is dignity? I mean, for her, the way she was saying, dignity is to be able to grow our food and have it in our belly. It's to not be hungry. But to go a little bit further, dignity is to have autonomy and exercise that self-determination in your community, your territory. And it's to control, whether it be your food, your healthcare, your education, but also your culture and your identity. That is what we understand as dignity when we want to remain in our territories. Not have to depend on the state or a company for handouts because everything was destroyed and we're not able to sustain ourselves anymore. That is not remaining with dignity. We organize by watersheds. It would be incoherent for us to organize on like states or counties when if something happens in the upper part of a watershed, everything downriver from there will be impacted. So we organize as part of our watersheds. It is part of the decolonizing of our relationship to our territories and our identities being tied to our watersheds and our bioregions and not the regional and local political divisions that the Colombian state created. Another part I don't like. As I mentioned, Colombia has over a 60-year-old civil war, an internally armed conflict. And it's important to put the scenario of anti-dam and environmentalists within the context of what's going on. So last year in Colombia, 25 environmentalists were assassinated. That puts us as number 2 in the entire world for environmentalist assassinations. To give you general context, number 1 is India. India has 1,200,000 people, Colombia has 48 million, and we're number 2. So it's very disproportionate for us to be number 2 in those types of statistics. It's also, you notice, these are all people who are leading our processes, who have been killed or disappeared, all in different circumstances. The particular case of Saint Pedraza, which is an elder from my territory, has to do with the elders and how elders are impacted by these projects, because the type of psychological trauma that an elder endures, elders that, keep in mind, have lived in the same village their entire life, maybe at the most have gone to the regional capital twice in their entire lives, and then someone arrives one day to this 85 or 90 or even 75-year-old elder and tells them basically, you have to leave, you have no choice, everything you have ever known will be gone, the way you have always lived, you will not have that as an option anymore. Too bad. In my region, we've lost at least 12 elders because of depression and the psychological trauma that this causes them. Here are these 3 leaders, as well as other people who have been killed. Quite frankly, we can't give you a list of how many people have been killed because of these processes. And to really emphasize how and why they're targeting us, so the right-wing militias or the death squads, the paramilitaries in Colombia had a false demobilization process. They never demobilized. It was a charade. It was for the media. It was a spectacle. But those paramilitary leaders, the generals who are committed to horrendous massacres of hundreds of people, collectively probably hundreds of thousands of people, are actually all sitting in minimum security penitentiary facilities in Miami for drug trafficking charges, not for massacring people. So Carlos Castaño, the paramilitary leader, one of the many who was in Miami, when he was asked why they disappeared Kimian Kimi Pernia-Dominko, the indigenous and Veracatio leader who was leading the struggle against the Urra Dam in the 1990s, he specifically said, the dam. We killed him because he would not allow the dam to be completed. This is the Kimbo Dam we just saw in the video. Unfortunately, on June 30th of this year, the reservoir started to be filmed. All the footage you guys saw was on December and January and November of last year. Since June 30th, it's been very difficult in my region. My village is here, at the tail end of the dam. The water has yet to arrive there, but each day it's about 6 feet closer. These are shots from the reservoir from about 2 months ago, and this is downriver from the dam. A lot of this information was already mentioned in the video. 26,000 people will be impacted. 8,500 hectares is 21,000 acres. I realize that we don't do hectares very much here in the States. Our regional organization that is against the dam is Asoquimbo. So keep in mind, Ríos Vivos is the national organization. And then the different regional places in Colombia that have dam struggles that are part of the national movement have their own regional organizations. In the case of Huila, we're Asoquimbo. And then Asoquimbo is built up by committees. And we get together like we saw in that graphic, we have assemblies, we argue at each other, and then we have to be there for hours because we're not going to leave until we're all agreeing on the same thing, which is really hard because we all think very differently. But we do it. And the committee that I'm a part of, that is part of Asoquimbo, is a collective from my village called Decolonizing or Descolonizando la Agua. So this is the village that my maternal grandfather is from. It's where I spent my childhood summers a lot as a child. And it's where I've been living full-time since 2011. La Agua was a port or a pluricultural territory prior to the European invasion. What am I saying? Lots of different native people lived there. They weren't all the same peoples. They had different languages, and they shared that territory. With the arrival of the Spanish and the creating of a resguardo, which is like a mission, for 400 years, basically into the middle of last century, children, Amazonian children, were systematically kidnapped, brought to our village, and brainwashed to be basically servants to the church for a very long time. So that is why today in my community, people still weave, people still heal with traditional plants, we still use traditional building, wattle and daub, mud and stick. We still fish and we still plant according to lunar cycles. The men still weave their own fishing nets, the women weave these bags. All of that is still maintained. Nobody speaks a language other than Spanish, and if you ask them if they're indigenous, they will become scandalized that you would even suggest such an idea. You ask them where they learned how to weave, and they'll say the indigenous people. You ask them who the indigenous people are, they'll say their great-grandmothers, their grandmothers. And then you ask them if they're indigenous, and you may as well have insulted them. So colonization runs deep, and we have a lot of work to do in my community. This wall is an adobe. So here we're going to get into a lot of the art, some of the other art stuff that we're doing as part of these processes of land defense. So this is an adobe wall that goes around the schoolyard. It's 200 years old. It was about to fall over, and we recuperate it with what we call mingas de trabajo, collective works where the community comes together. So we did these mingas, we recuperated the wall, and then before we painted with the youth, we did these different outings that included hikes and interviews with elders. Because if we're talking about defending a territory, and we are fighting to defend where we're from, we have to know what we're defending. So to know what we're defending, we would go around the territory and we had to learn about the non-human inhabitants. We're not just going to paint any old pretty bird because it's pretty. What are the birds that actually live here? What is their ecology? What is their behavior? What does they do? And in that way, as well as interviewing the elders who could tell the youth about what the territory and the community was like prior, we were able to create this mural that's about 90 feet long, about 6 feet high, that tells the story of the territory that we want to protect and that we want to defend. Over 3 days, about 50 people participated on this project. The youngest being about 5 years of age, and the oldest being about 75 years of age. These are photographs of petroglyphs, carvings in these stone cliffs that our ancestors made, and here are the child renditions of how they painted them as well. And then another mechanism that we've used is there is this online platform called Project NOAA that's for geeks that like wildlife photography, taking pictures of animals and plants and things of that nature. And you know, it's a friendly crowdsourced site. You put up your photo, use a Google Earth app, and you locate where you took that photograph, and you put some information about the biology of the plant or the animal. But this website allows you to make missions. And you can group together entries into this website depending on whatever you want. So within the context of Colombia, a lot of times the companies that do these projects have to do their own environmental impact statement. And since those environmental impact statements is what will decide whether or not they get permission to do the project or not, they're not very honest on them, because there's a lot of information that's not convenient for them to get out. So we've decided that we can do those statements for them. They don't need to do that. And through this crowdsourced site, we have been able to document close to 300 species in our region, while the company in 2009, when they did their environmental impact statement, only mentioned 200. So we've already got them beat, and we're working with other communities to develop this as a mechanism as well. The creators of this website never created the website with this intention, but when they found out about it, they actually went ecstatic and wrote articles about us, and we're really happy that people were giving it this type of usage. I know they look mean, but they're really cute. I promise you, rattlesnakes are really cute. The fer de lance snake, that one I won't mess with. But rattlesnakes are cool.
What snake?
The fer de lance. Yeah, it's pretty horrible, and they'll chase you, and they're always in pairs. So if you're dumb enough to kill one, you better start running, because its mate will realize that you killed it and come after you as well. I just prefer to put them in a burlap sack, cross the river, let them on the other side, and come right back to my side of the river. Because they're mean, yeah. So you know, as if one dam wasn't enough, or two dams, because there's already 2 dams on the river, the Colombian government has decided we need 17 dams on the Magdalena River. And 17 dams isn't enough. So from the middle region all the way to where the delta is, they want to dredge the entire river, like we saw in the Amazon, to send oil, to take coal out of here, and to take oil that's already here and just send them out to North American and European markets. So we have a lot of work set up for us, because now we have another 15 dams that we have to fight, in addition to the one that we just were not effectively able to defeat. The root word here is geography and choreography. This process that we started last year with the accompaniment of an artist, a Colombian artist, but who's currently based out of LA, was focusing on everything that we will lose because of the dam that nobody's taken into account, and that nobody's thinking about will be lost. And we thought about the movements. There are certain movements that you do that is tied to a place. And if you don't have that place, you will not do that movement. So an example is my cousin, I won't do this, but my cousin really loves doing the triple somersault backwards off of a cliff into the river. If you don't have the appropriate depth of water and the appropriate cliff, you're not going to do that, because you'll die. The people who weave cast nets will not weave cast nets if there's nobody to go fish, because there's no longer a river with fish in there. The people who pan for gold will no longer use those techniques that you might just think it's easy to do that and you get the gold out. It ain't. It takes a lot of technique to do that. Especially if you're not going to use cyanide or mercury, so you don't contaminate the river, to be able to do that, all based on wrist movements. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of expertise. So we're looking at all these movements that with the creation of the dam, we're going to lose them. These movements will be gone. Like, what am I going to do, throw a cast net in the middle of the street to catch a horse? That doesn't make sense. So based on these movements, with youth from 5 different communities, we did trainings based on dance, performance, street theater, and puppetry. And then based on the movements we're going to lose and on these skills, we did 9 direct actions. 5 rural and 4 urban. They all had to be done in public spaces, because we are recuperating public space. And to create these different performances that talk about the urgency of what's going on. So for instance, in one village, the kids went out to sell bottles of water for 1,000,000 pesos every bottle of water. That's like $500,000. Like somebody coming up to you in a market and be like, buy this bottle of water for $500,000. And then people are like, you are freaking insane. And then the kid would say, oh no, it said you adults already polluted all the rivers. And all the mountaintop where the rivers were born, they already dried up because of you. And this is the last water that's left that's not polluted. So you can have it for 1,000,000 pesos, or you can go drink that polluted water that you all left us, the next generation. And those were the type of actions that the youth were doing in marketplaces. Keep in mind, marketplace in these rural communities, Saturday comes, the entire region goes to the marketplace. You're gonna put on your best clothes because the girl, the guy you've been looking at is gonna be a marketplace. You gotta sell, you gotta buy. So everybody's a marketplace. They're very pivotal
I had a
places.
question, probably everybody wanted to know.
Uh-huh.
Did he sell any of the water?
I'm sorry?
Did he sell any of the water?
No, but actually a lot of people were so impressed that they would buy them cups of freshly made juice so that they can drink while they were performing. So people were actually really supportive of the actions. That's a good question. And then based on that, we also did a film development where kids learned how to make their videos. And actually, the video that we just saw, that was one of the products from that. We're almost done. This region, Oporapa, which is fighting another one of those 17 dams. I'm standing on it. I'm not a window, more like a door. And then this region, Yagilga, which is fighting against fracking. They participated in the geochoreography process. They're our homies, we love them, we support each other a lot. But we are also working with them because they are in regions where they haven't implemented the project yet. So this whole idea of like, you need to exercise control of your territory and not let anybody in is what we are working and developing with them in a context very different than Parota, Mexico. Like Colombia is way different. So what we've developed in these communities that we found very effective is phone trees. I see the really flashy white pickup truck where the engineers are coming to get soil samples. I get my cell phone, I'm gonna call 2 people. And those 2 people call another 2 people. And those 2 people call another 2 people. In about half an hour, we can have 1,000 farmers surrounding that truck, all with machetes in hand. We sternly yet politely tell them they have to leave. And that has been very effective till now. Keep in mind there are other regions in Colombia where this happens, and then a month later people are killed, schools are firebombed. Like, it's real. Like, it's not like, oh, we got them out and we're done. Like, job's done. No, like, that's the easy part. So we constantly have to be vigilant, and we also have to be, you know, on our guard about all these different things. What do we do in the next couple of years? I currently mentioned with Putumayo, we're helping them develop the curriculum as well as making more videos. With the YU, they want to use the Project NOAA stuff. We're actually trying to help them create an agroecology drylands permaculture curriculum because so La Guajira, where all these YU people are, I didn't mention this earlier, it's a pretty intense area. Probably weekly, 1 to 2 children die of hunger or thirst in La Guajira. Weekly. And this is an area that doesn't have to be living this. And everybody's solution to the problem is, oh, we'll just ship them food. No, they need to grow their own food. So we're working them in terms of recuperating traditional drylands agriculture because they used to have it, but with the stupid coal mines and all the trans-border black market economics, because that's a reality of any border community, whether it be Colombia, Venezuelan border, or Mexico, US border. You put you on a border and there's price differences on both sides and there's not much work, you're gonna figure it out for yourself. So people start growing also because of those dynamics. So they have requested a specific interest in that, as well as the recuperating of melipona culture, not apiculture bees. Melipona are these stingless honeybees native to the Americas, not found anywhere else in the world, that only pollinate certain plants that are from here, that include the vanilla bean orchid. They also, the different YU organizations we work with, want one of these about them. But as I mentioned, we make educational tools and we don't make art. So if YU people want an educational tool about the YU people, who has to make it?
They do.
They do. So our role is accompanying the process. We're going to accompany them, help them with the methodology, help them in all the organizing, and when there is a finished product, we will take over in terms of helping fundraise to get it printed and help them get out. In the meanwhile, we're going to all the schools and getting these graphics into YU teachers' hands so they have a point of reference of what graphic-based education can look like. And then with the Rios Vivos movement, you know, I just showed you all these things that we're doing in Huila, in my region, but there's like a whole country of like watersheds, 100 dams they want to build and like 30 dams that already exist. And other than my region, folks have not had a lot of opportunities to learn about the use of art and media as part of land defense. So we're going to take it on the road, starting next year, and we're going to start going to all the different dams in Colombia, working with communities to develop, whether it be mural painting or theater or these different things, as part of their land defense strategies, and simultaneously do the research, because as the coordination of the national movement of Rios Vivos, we also have a political school. So our political school brings people together from all the dam impacted communities, where we kind of like deepen our understanding of everything that's going on. And it was consensusly decided by the entire movement that we needed one of these about our story. So while we're doing that tour, we will also be doing the research to create a graphic by and for dam impacted communities not only in Colombia, hopefully the world, but it's going to be focused on Colombia. What can folks do to help? Well, the first thing you guys already did, you already did it. You're here. You're listening to me. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. This is the first day on the Florida tour, so I'm really happy to be here with y'all. Yeah, unfortunately, we still need money. You know, we haven't figured out how to overthrow capitalism yet, so if you got a bunch and you're not attached to it, we'll take it off your hands. But most folks are, so we have a bunch of goods in the back. All the goods we have are either from the collective, or they were made by folks from the different communities that we just showed you. Everybody was fairly compensated for their goods, and they're very aware that all the proceeds or the profits from those goods are going to go to continue financing the projects that we're doing within their own communities. If folks have extra digital cameras, audio recorders, things of that nature, they're always a huge tool, a good resource to have down there. Cloth banners are also great. They're kind of pricey. If people want to sponsor a community with a cloth banner. You can imagine in very hot, humid places, a paper poster doesn't last very long. And visit with intention. I speak very harshly about tourism, but that's why I say visit with intention. People love visitors. If I don't get a visitor in my village at least once every 2 months, I start to get scolded. But it's serious. You have to visit with intention. You're not going to Cancun to like go crazy drunk for a week and then never go back and not care about who was there. Like this is like to go build long-lasting relationships, and people will never forget about you, and they will very intensely be like, okay, where are you? When are you going to come back? And they will become very attached to you as you will of them. So that being said, there's all sorts of different skills that are needed down there. And if you are a person who is interested in that, in a very selfless way, going living with communities in very different ways than we're used to up here, and being able to participate in those spaces and not maybe so like freaked out by new experiences, then definitely talk because it's real and people enjoy it. That being said,
what are the types of skills they need down there mostly?
Art skills, construction, like DIY engineering skills. Those are huge down there. Like people who could put together like dry water or gray water systems and things like that. Bike machines, like pedal powered.
Blenders.
Thank you.
Do they have workshop areas? Do they have tools to?
In the neighboring town of mine, it's a 40,000 person town, so there's a lot of things there. I mean, you can get basically everything you need. And it depends on the different communities. Like in the Wayuu communities, they need folks to help develop drylands permaculture. Like specifically how to produce food in a degraded, arid environment. That's what they need. In the Amazon, they specifically want people who have experience in decolonizing education within indigenous communities. So it's like a very specific skill set. In all the damn communities, in all the communities in general, theater of the oppressed. Augusto Boal, I mentioned earlier. People love theater of the oppressed methodologies, exercises. They're really good for all these types of processes. I mean, I don't know if y'all noticed, like those pictures where there's that blue thing that people are carrying. Like that's a puppet of the river. It's a 90-foot long puppet. So I'm gonna go to a community and be like, hey, who wants to go and blockade the roads today? Nah, I'm kind of busy. I got something else to do. I gotta go cut my toenails. I can't blockade the road today. I'm gonna go do it. Who wants to go march with a puppet? Oh, me. Yeah, that 90-foot puppet needs 50 people to hold it up, and you got 50 people holding it up. You already blockaded the road. Done. So it's also how to de-escalate the perceived risk of participating in these spaces. Because when it's a bunch of kids and moms holding this big smiley blue snake, all of a sudden, you don't look like the black bloc. And they're not going to respond to you in the exact same way. So, that being said, I want to finish on a really high note. There's one last video. We didn't make it, but some friends of ours in Bolivia made it. It's called Abuela Grillo. Some of you may have already know it. It means grandmother cricket. In Bolivia, in 2002, the government tried to privatize the water and take the water away from the people. The people rose up. They said no, and actually kicked the president out of the country while they were at it. Pretty badass, I think. And there is a myth or a traditional story of the Ayoreo indigenous people about grandmother cricket who sings and calls the rain. So the creators of this video took the story of the water wars and they took the story of grandmother cricket and they combined the two to make this very cool animation that has no dialogues and lasts for 10 minutes. Enjoy.
Otra.